I problemi tecnici. Noi diamo la parola alla dottoressa Véronique Riches-Flores, capo economista Europa della Società Generale, per cercare di capire, ecco, qual è dal suo osservatorio l'idea che si è fatta della situazione di crisi che stiamo vivendo. Prego.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I think I speak in English. It's better for everybody if you have a translation. Well, I think I have many points of agreement with the professor, and indeed it's certainly true and certainly surprising to claim for an exit, an inflationary exit in the current situation of the current economic crisis, after years of fighting inflation with all governments, all central banks around the world being so proud of having almost killed inflation. We never kill inflation, hopefully. Now, in the current situation, when you are facing a major risk of deflation, I think then inflation is seen differently. And we probably all prefer inflation rather than deflation. Deflation is a long process, is an extremely long, devastating process. It's a social problem. Usually, it has been in the past, each time we had deflation, it has ended by wars, geopolitical problems. And at the end, deflation is certainly not a curative stage. What is the inflation? It's just devastating. At least inflation is an evil, certainly. It has very negative influence, very negative impact. But at the end, inflation has one advantage: to eat in the stock of debt. And where are we today? In a situation where the private sector has, around the world, accumulated an amount of debt which is simply inimaginable. The US economy, Europe, outside Germany, and continental Europe, not only the British economy, emerging countries, it's much more difficult to estimate what is the level of debt of the private sector in China and region by region, but we know that there has been an excessive liquidity environment and a major risk of financial crisis also in this region of the world. Now, the financial crisis at the end just tells us that this way of creating or supporting growth is no longer possible. So we no longer count on credit to support growth in the future. I just ask a question: what will replace credit? Our growth in Western economies in the last 15 years has been essentially a question of low interest rates, high credit facility, indebtedness, housing bubble after the internet bubble, and lower savings ratio amongst households. Now that we no longer have this support, where the economic support will come from, I have no idea. There is no way to imagine a recovery, and even I accept the idea of a technical recovery, of course, with such negative forces at the end of the year. We hope some bounce back. Yes, certainly there will be a bounce back in Q2, Q3 next year. But this is not the decent growth, a return to decent economic conditions that will allow our economy to prepare the future. The economic situation, the fundamental situation of our Western economies is pretty poor. We are just at the beginning of a major demographic shock that will impact our potential our growth potential for decades. We have, as I said, a level of debt which are close to 200% of the US GDP, just taking into consideration the private sector. More than 100% for the UK economy. In the Eurozone outside Germany, the level of debt of private sector is extremely high. So now, after this recession, what is the logic outcome? Deleveraging. And what is deleveraging creating? A long period of distressed economy. This is the case of Japan. This has been the case of Germany after the unification. This is why the deficit in consumption in Germany is something like 15% in comparison to French consumption. And French is far from being an example. Anyway, coming years will be the one of deleveraging, which will be a major drag on the global growth. The major risk is clearly deflation. If we have deflation, we will never exit, or exit in a long time, from this very negative spiral. And social unrest, political unrest, everything which is linked to deflation. So I see only one possible exit, which is, as I said at the beginning, maybe shocking, but it's inflation. If we are not able to create a little bit of inflation, but we know that's difficult to control then after. If we are not able to create inflation, we will probably be facing a major problem for a long period of time. So clearly, inflation is the only exit. How to create inflation where we are on the middle of deflationary forces? It's difficult. Clearly, it's not only monetary policies and lower interest rates that are able to create inflation. Even printing money is not able to create inflation when the financial system is out of working. So first, we need absolutely to rebuild the banking sector, to protect it, to recapitalize the banking sector, and to make it working properly so that the money circulates. So we probably need to do more on this respect. The Obama new package will probably help to sort out this situation. European countries might have to do more in terms of recapitalizing the banking sector, and maybe with no options for banks. I think states need to enter in the capital of banking sector just to make it reworking properly, and then after exit the state. That's certainly the first step. Secondly, well, the Fed has begun to print a lot of money. So once the financial markets and the banking sector works properly, this money will circulate. But we can also spend a lot on the public sector. This won't be enough. In public expenditure in infrastructure will take years before having any impact on growth. We know that in our economies we are not able to decide to build up a railway or I don't know what in 3 months. No, it takes 5 years, 10 years, who knows. So I don't really count on this big package, which are probably necessary on a longer-term perspective, to restore conditions of growth in the short term. So certainly we are in a situation where we end with, well, what is the exit? Public jobs. That's an option that the government will consider certainly in coming quarters. But now Western economies will not be able to create inflation if the Chinese economy is doing the opposite. So we look at China. What is doing the Chinese economy and the Chinese government if not creating inflation? Chinese government has put in place an enormous package, a fiscal package or a stimulus package, so big that we doubt they will be able to do what they have promised. But they are ready. They are ready because they are facing a major political and social risk. So they will do the maximum to avoid a significant slowdown of the economy. They can do a lot on the export side. They will rebuild or build the domestic demand, construction, infrastructure, invest a lot to prevent social unrest. And we know that the situation is very fragile. So I'm fully confident in the Chinese authorities to put money in their system and to inflate their economies with jobs, with expenditure, public expenditure, lower interest rates, and to use their reserves, FX reserves, for their own need. So this raises a question: how we will finance all the fiscal stimulus around the world if the Chinese authorities are no longer putting so much money in other countries. It's also a consideration that leads us to think that, well, at the end, if we don't have inflation, that's probably something awful. Because we might, there's a big risk to have deflation with higher bond yield. Because we risk missing some funds for some money to finance all the needs to rebuild our economies. So all this led me to think that, first of all, the Chinese economy is probably going in the way of creating inflation, which will raise major concern on the longer run. In the countries that have built its catch-up on the export competitiveness, inflation is certainly a major concern. But they have no choice. They are just promoting the domestic demand, which is the area where inflation is the easiest to take off, especially because you have lower productivity and less technology transfer. And it's the way they are going. And that's also the only way to prevent the financial crisis in this country to take major or too big proportions. So if I understand well, if it's the way where the Chinese economy is going, I think, well, yes, probably we have chance to avoid depression. We have chance to rebuild a modest growth around the world. But the bigger chance I'll see is the comeback of inflation. Ideally, I would say a comeback of modest inflation. We don't need 10% inflation in the world to eat in the stock of debt. 3% is enough. 3% per year is largely enough. It makes the works, it's concentrated the adjustment in, I would say, a decent period of time. But we know that doing what is necessary to just keep inflation alive in the current environment, which is strongly deflationary, is probably taking a major risk to create much higher inflation at the end. So that's the responsibility of policymakers to adjust their policy, but the exercise is extremely, if not impossible, extremely difficult. So this is what I think, and I hope, honestly, that this will be the outcome: inflation, higher inflation, to just eat in the stock of debt, facing and to be able to enter in this demographic change in better situation. If we are not able to reduce the stock of debt we have built in the public sector, in the private sector, and now in the public sector, especially for Europe, this will be a disaster. A disaster. I'm not speaking about depression or whatever. It's a disaster. So that's the only way. That's why we should accept a lesser of an evil, which is inflation instead of deflation. That's my essential message. Short term now, if we look at investors today simply don't know where we will, which forces will at the end win this battle. Are we sure to be able to create inflation? How long it will take? Who knows? Even people like me, I'm relatively convinced that it's the only way and that it will end like this. But how long might it take? I don't know. And for an investor, investing in markets, so difficult market currently, why you don't know if the exit will be deflation or inflation, is simply impossible. So you are just waiting and wait until having a better visibility. So I don't think financial market will perform particularly well in the short term. Yes, again, if we have a bounce back, a brief in growth, there will be some respite probably, but I don't expect financial market to provide any satisfactory trend in the coming 2 years. That's it for me.